Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. So excited to be hosting the first Lettering Create of the year. If you haven't done it yet, I invite you to say hello on the chat and let us know where you're joining from. So today we'll be having students joining from our lettering seminar, but this is also a public event, so everyone can join and can also submit a lettering piece for revision. So if you haven't joined a lettering create yet, this is how this is gonna work out. So the lettering create is essentially a critique session where you and I will give comments on different lettering pieces, and I would not be the only one talking and giving comments. I would be the one kind of writing on paper what you tell me on the chat. I know I will of course give some of my own comments, but I will be at all times looking at the chat and picking up from your comments. So this is a great opportunity not only for you or those selected pieces to get feedback, but also to sort of train your typographic eye, or what I call your typographic eye, and kind of put your observation skills to work and give your peers comments on their lettering pieces. So today we have 5 lettering pieces, and 4 of those lettering pieces, or I think we have between 4 and 5. So most of those lettering pieces will be from students from our lettering seminar. As you know, I host an 8-week lettering seminar every year where I take students and I kind of guide them through a full training to improve their skills at drawing letter forms. And, you know, this training includes a community, coaching calls or studio hours, and of course the pre-recorded lessons where they get to learn all of the aspects they need to learn about drawing letter form. So these students will show today, or some of the pieces that we will be criticizing today belong to some of the students of the lettering seminar. And we have we always have one lettering piece that belongs to someone that doesn't belong to our student community, but that we are happy to welcome them in this way into our academy. So without further ado, I'm gonna just get started. I see that there's people joining from Canada. Hi, Luisa. So Andrea from Argentina. So Molly from Sacramento. Damilola from Rwanda. Hi, Damilola. You're like a super fan of the lettering creeds. I've seen you on other lettering creeds. So Fernando from Brazil. Maria Amalia from Rio. Amazing. Rosanna. Hi, from England. Okay, Maria Angeles from Pamplona, and Elise from Richmond, US. Amazing. So welcome everybody. I am super excited about this lettering create. The lettering create is like my favorite events of all times. And it's basically because I get to see some of the work you are doing in the lettering seminar, but also because it is a space not only to give feedback, but also to, I always say that these sessions are not about like just smashing the lettering pieces and kind of pointing at everything that is wrong. Actually, it's rather the opposite. Sometimes when you're working on your own, on your lettering skills, and you're creating a lettering piece, you kind of need that reaffirmation of like, hey, you know, this thing you did looks really good, and look at that G, you really nailed that. And sometimes you need like an external eye to tell you what are the bits that are really good in your lettering piece. And of course you also need that kind of feedback on new ideas or how to solve some of the issues that you're having in your lettering piece. So I think this is great from these sessions, that we not only give kind of constructive feedback, but also we cheer on our students, and we really praise the things that you're doing right, which I think is equally important. So let's get started. There's new people coming in. I love that as you get the notifications, you just join the session. So we're going to start by the first lettering piece by Analia. So, all right. So we have, as I said, for those joining new to the session, sorry, I will be giving comments or kind of writing down the things and like making notes on the lettering pieces, but I will not be the only one giving comments on the lettering pieces, so I will be picking up on your comments on the chat. So make sure that you don't leave anything out. Whatever you think about the lettering piece, the things that are good and the things that you think have a room for improvement, just write it on the chat. I will pick up on it and I would just make the notes on the lettering piece. Think that someone else submitted this lettering piece just to get your comments, because they will be able, after the comments that we will give and the feedback that we will give, they will be able to really improve their lettering piece thanks to that. So don't hold back. Just write on the chat whatever you think about the lettering piece and I will pick up on that. So let's get started. So this is clearly a script lettering piece. As you know, a script lettering piece is essentially a lettering piece that is based on handwriting, and something characteristic from script lettering is that it has these connections, right? So this is like sorry, let me see if I'm writing on the right place. Yeah. So something characteristic from script lettering is that you find like every letter connects to the next one, right? Which is based on handwriting. So when you write by hand, you will always, or the main function of handwriting is that one letter leads to the next one and leads to the next one, right? So this way, the rhythm of writing and the speed of writing is enabled or facilitated. So when looking at this lettering piece, or when looking at a lettering piece, the first thing, and I will pick up on what you say on the chat in a few minutes, but I just want to give a little bit of a guideline of what are the first things that I would look at when I look at a lettering piece. So the first thing that I would look at is, can you read it? So a lettering piece is essentially a communication piece. So you're trying to convey a message, and this is kind of like the key of lettering. If you cannot read it, it's just something else. It's maybe a street art or some other thing, but it's really important that your lettering pieces are readable so that someone else can understand what you're trying to communicate. So the first thing that I would look at when I look at a lettering piece is it readable, or is it just me that I'm drawing this and I know what it says, but what if someone else reads this, right? So in the case of this lettering piece by Analia, I would say that there's some of the shapes that could be improved. I can understand that it's reading gracias, I guess, right? But I would say that there's some of the shapes that could be improved in order to really make it clear that it says gracias. When I look at the letter G, for instance, the letter G is so graceful and full of these swirls that it kind of goes over the top in terms of like sometimes you sort of miss the shape of the G, right? Especially when it comes to that swirl over there. So that would be my first comment, which is like, is there any shape that is going a little bit over the top that you can simplify a little bit more in order to, protect the readability of your lettering piece? So I think that's something easy in your lettering piece. Overall, you can, or I am able to read it, but some tweaks on, for instance, the G will make it easier for someone who is not speaking the language, or it's just, approaching your lettering piece for the first time. So that's one thing. The other thing I like to look at is, and I think that all of our students in the lettering seminar will know this, is that I like to look at the lettering piece as kind of like something that has a north, a south, and east. Is this the east? No, it's the other one. The west and the east, right? So if there's something going on in the north, what can be happening in the south that sort of compensates that? And if there's something going on in the west, what can happen on the east that sort of compensates that, right? So that the whole lettering piece is sort of balanced. It's sort of like a small, thing that I can hold in my hands and kind of has no edges to it, right? So that's as a start, because I'm gonna kind of speak about these two principles often. So I wanted to leave that clear from the very beginning, and I'm now gonna pick up on your comments on the chat. So hello to everyone who has joined recently. Okay, I'm gonna just read right here. So Maria Amalia, you were mentioning as well that the top of the G, of the capital G, is hard to read. And I think that just by simplifying that G over there, and closing up that gap, you can, and perhaps even kind of eliminating that extra swirl right there, you can make that G a lot more readable. And I would say that you don't really need that extra swirl right there, right? In fact, it makes this part of your lettering a little bit too busy, right? So perhaps by simplifying that letter form, it will be more readable, and it will also help you balance your composition. So Luisa is saying, I love how the swashes frame the word. One thing that I wonder is how to integrate the S. Is the intention that it is an uppercase S? So that's an interesting comment. I think that, Luisa, what you are referring to here is why is this S looking, it sort of has a little bit of an uppercase feel to it. And I think this may have to do with the fact that it almost aligns to the G right there, and it's not aligning to the rest of the letter the lowercase letters right here. So if you kind of trace the baseline and the X height of this lettering piece, you will think like, okay, why is this S kind of going beyond those boundaries if this S is actually a lowercase letter? And I think I get what Analia is trying to do here, which is like, and it's something that I always encourage my students to do, which is like, if your lettering is starting very flamboyant and complex on one side, so if the west of your lettering is very complex, like she is, or like the G is making it right now, so the G makes the west of this lettering very complex and very flamboyant. So I think what Analia is trying to do here is to end this lettering also in a complex way, right? And I think this solution of using an alternate shape for the S, normally, I'm gonna zoom in here, normally your S or your lowercase s for script lettering will look a little bit like this. And I think I always like to think of various shapes for one single letter, or let's say alternative shapes for one single letter. And I think this shape is actually the one that Analia is using here. And I think it's a clever decision. Perhaps a way of making it look a little bit more lowercase is to lower down the top of the S to match that X height, and kind of use perhaps some of this flourishes here to cover up that space, right? So once you move down this lowercase s, you will have a little bit of a gap right there. So you can cover with all the swirls and flourishes that you have, you can very well cover up for that that gap right there. So Mapco, I hope that I'm pronouncing your name properly. So you're saying that the S can be improved, as well as adding baseline and X height will improve this work. Yeah, I think that the X height and the baseline is actually there, and I can totally see it. But it's true that this S is kind of missing the spot, or kind of, still finding its spot. So definitely perhaps using or sticking to some of these guidelines, either the baseline or the X height, will help you do that. Great. So we can move on to the next lettering piece. But before, I want to make a comment on the connections. So I see that you're having connections here, there, right there, and right there, right? And I wonder why some of them are not connected. I think this has to do with, how rough the drawing is. But I would definitely encourage to do those connections as clear as possible, so that they're not like script. It's not like I often see on the street someone using a script font and kind of spacing the whole font a lot more, and so that the connections are not connected at the end. So I wonder if you can really connect those letters so that there's no question that this is a script lettering. And something I always like to do with script lettering is that I like to have those connections kind of smoothly coming into the next letter, right? So that there's almost a soft transition between the connection and the letter, as opposed to that, which is like, kind of like the, in a way, the connection is sort of stabbing the next letter. So instead of stabbing is like a knife. So instead of stabbing the next letter, I would say caress the next letter with your connection, right? So I hope that was useful, Analia, sorry. And I'm going to move on to Luisa's work. I think, Luisa, you are there. Am I right? Yes, I see it. Luisa, is that yours? I hope it's yours, because we can give you comments right away. So as I said, write on the chat anything that comes up for you when you see Luisa's work on the screen. Of course, the things that you like, and of course, as well, the things that you think could be improved. So Luisa is doing, let me just look at this. Luisa is doing a very condensed serif lettering with this beautiful, let me just add a layer here. So with this beautiful bold terminals, and I love how the use of those terminals is very consistent throughout the lettering piece. So those bold terminals are being used in the letter forms, but also in some of the flourishes, right? Right here at the bottom and right here at the top. So Laura is saying beautiful. Yes. Yes, Lina is saying love it. Amazing. Yeah. So Yeah, and I really like kind of how the idea of this ball terminal is being used as part of the features of the lettering piece. So it's being used as, as the point of the eye. Of course, that if you, or one could question the fact that this is an uppercase letter form, and it would not need a dot on the I, but I think we can totally make the exception here, and I think it really adds to the flavor of the lettering piece to have that dot of the I, even when it doesn't correspond, because this is an uppercase letter form, right? But I love how, if you look at these shapes, they show up consistently at the bottom and at all sides of this lettering piece, right? I just wonder, going back to what we just mentioned in Analia's lettering piece, we said at that time that, or in the previous lettering piece, we said that what I always try to accomplish is that a lettering piece starts in a similar way that it ends. It gives like a sense of like, a sense of like completeness in a way. And when I look at the way the G looks here on this lettering piece, Luisa, I wonder if there could be something similar happening on your W. If you could do or accomplish something similar here, and when I, there's various ways of solving that, but I'm gonna sketch kind of like the solution I'm thinking of right now. So what if this W would have something here, right? Which relates to the way the G looks at the end of this lettering piece. So this is just an idea. Take it or leave it, but I think it will really help to have that kind of like little wink in the beginning and at the end. So let me see what the chat says. So Andrea is saying, so Elise loves this, Christopher as well. Andrea is saying it's beautiful but a little difficult to understand the word. I agree. I think it is hard to read, especially in the ends, when it comes to the ends. But we're gonna work through that in a second. I think the thin lines can be a bit wider. Laura is saying. Okay, so a couple of things to improve readability. And I think, when I look at the contrast of your letter forms, they are working. They are, it is consistent. So the contrast, as you all know, is the difference between the thin and the thick parts of your letter. So these are the thin parts and these are the thick parts. So Luisa, this is working nicely and is consistent throughout the piece. But when it comes to readability, the fact that all of your letters are so compressed and also that they are so close together makes it very hard to read. Or not very hard, but I think this could be improved. And I think this could be improved if you would add a bit more space between the letters. So if you will have a bit more space here and there and there, right? And as you all know, there's a principle or an overall rule to define the spacing, or the kind of like the ideal spacing for a lettering piece, is that the space within the letter should be equal to the space between the letters. And if you look at the space within the P right here, So let's focus shortly on the space, the inner space of the B. So I want you to look at all of this. If you look at that inner space, and then you look at the space between the I and the P, there could be a bit more space right there, especially if you look at the space within the N and you look at the space between the N's, then it becomes really clear that there's a spacing issue, that if you add a bit more space, those letters will become a lot more readable. So sometimes it's just about adding space for the letters to be recognized, right? So let me see if I can pick up on some of the comments here. So Luisa, I have a question about the dots. Is it distracting that the E and the end of the G have the same weight and size of dots? No, I wouldn't say so. I think that it actually works. I think if they are both gonna use dots, then why not? Why not having like the same weight? I think that is what keeps consistency throughout the piece, that all of these dots kind of have the same size. Okay, so Elise is saying, things I would note, for some reason the W isn't reading as legible as some of the other letters. Also the second N looks a little bit too skinny, and the G looks like it may be slightly tilted. Great. So once we look at the overall piece and like kind of understood the overall features and also like the overall problem of readability and how to solve it, we can dive into the detail, or I wouldn't say the details, but we can just start looking at each letter in particular. So what Elise is saying here is to pay attention to each one of the letters in particular and understand what can be improved to make them better and make them more readable. So I think the W has perhaps a room for improvement in terms of becoming more of a W. And with this I mean that if you look at the W, I'm just gonna do this, and let me see if I can do this. If you look at the W, it looks like an M upside down, right? And I always say that what is really fundamental of the W is that it is a very diagonal shape, or it's a purely diagonal shape, right? So what I see here is a shape that is primarily rectangular. So, you know, if you go back to the lessons of the lettering seminar where we go through the system of the alphabet, just to understand the group of letter forms, and we kind of group the letter forms that are rectangular and the letters that are diagonal or triangular. The W is primarily a triangular letter form, and in your case, Luisa, you're having a letter form that is primarily rectangular. So I think that perhaps adding a little bit of a diagonal to those shapes will help make this letter form a lot more readable, and also kind of add a bit of variation to your lettering so that you don't have all of these very rectangular shapes throughout your lettering. So and I think that Elise, just picking up on what Elise said, I think it would be nice to revise the width of your letter form, so that you can look at, for instance, your ends, that they are kind of looking the same width, or look at, compare your N with your E or your G. I have the feeling that all of these letters, or the group of these three letters here, is wider than those four letters here. 4 or 5 letters here, right? Can you see that? Can you see that PEG is a bit wider? Overall, like those letters are wider in comparison to the first W, I, and N, I. So I hope you can see that. So great. So we're going to move on to the next lettering piece. So Luisa, I hope this was useful and that you can use this feedback for your next steps with this project, which is already looking amazing. So go ahead. I would love to see how this moves forward, how you kind of improve this in steps and in layers as well, and you take it onto a digital drawing. I'm really looking forward to see how that lettering piece really takes off when you take it onto a more precise technique like a digital drawing. So let's look at Victoria's project. So Victoria's project involves illustration and also decorative elements. So Victoria, if you're there, just raise your hand and say hello. If you're not there, you'll watch this on the replay that we're going to send to you all. So let's start by, again, thinking, you know, the readability of this project, if this is readable, if there's perhaps some room for improvement when it comes to readability. And the other thing will be to think of, you know, this, as I said, these are the first two things that I like to think of when I look at the lettering piece. The readability, first thing to get right, and the composition, or like the north, south, east, west, you know, aspect of the lettering and the composition. So Luisa, I'm glad that that was helpful. Amazing. So great. So I'm gonna start, and I'm gonna pick up your comments on the chat. So let Victoria know what are the great bits about this lettering piece, but also what are the things that could be improved, and perhaps some ideas to actually improve it. So I'm gonna focus first on readability, and I think, I mean, it's really clear what it says. I can totally read clothing exchange. But I feel that, as we mentioned in some of the previous projects from Analia and Luisa, I think that by tweaking and simplifying some of the shapes, this lettering piece could be a lot more readable. I'm just thinking that also when you're working on a sketch, you can see the overlappings, right? You can see that there's an E here. So you can see that there's an E right here, right? But because you can see that overlapping, and you can also see that there's an overlapping here, right? But as you digitize this and you turn it into a one color lettering, then this becomes a big black blob, right, in your lettering. So you will want, from the sketch, starting from the sketch, to kind of avoid this, I wouldn't say overlappings. Overlappings are welcome, but I would try to avoid, or try to envision how that will look when I digitize it, or when I make it one full color, and try to simplify those shapes so that you can avoid these big dark spots in your lettering. So that would be the first thing. I think by simplifying those shapes, you can already create a much more readable lettering. I think just by shifting this E and giving this E, I'm gonna delete this. By shifting this E and by giving this E kind of like a space there, this will already, you know, you will be able to see this swirled a lot better, which is really nice. And it's a pity that it's been kind of covered by the sea, and the overall shape will be a lot more readable. The same happens with the H. Perhaps the H can have just one overlapping here, right? And you can lower the H so that it is not so high and close to the T, and you will enable, or you will add a bit, or you will kind of open a bit more space at the top of the H so that it can be recognized as an H. Does it make sense? So instead of having kind of 3 overlappings here, right? You would just have 1 or 2. Great. So I'm gonna pick up on your comments. Yeah, so Rosanna was actually commenting on the same. The H could be modified to improve readability, and I think either you avoid the overlapping, or you create an overlapping that is not overlapping so much, if it makes sense. Great. And I think what Maria was saying is also useful. I think you could very well separate these words. You know, you could add a bit more space between those those 2 words, right? Great. So that's one thing. I think it's also very clear how Victoria used the decorative elements. I always say that when trying to accomplish balance in your lettering piece, decorative elements can come really handy. They can help you cover up for blank spaces, and they can help you kind of create balance in your composition. And I think that also the illustrations are helping Victoria do that as well. So I think it's a very clever way of using decorative elements and illustrations. What I always say is that, or what I try to do when adding decorative elements, especially when it comes to line work, which is like my favorite thing to do ever in the world, I try to find ways of connecting the decorative elements with the lettering, and this can be done just by adding some of the features of your decorative elements into the letter forms, right? So for instance, perhaps adding some of the lines on the sides of the letter forms, or even adding some of the lines inside the letter forms. So find ways to bring some of the things that are in your decorative elements into the, so can you see how that relates to that? So this is a way of connecting the background or the miscellaneous things with the main lettering. I think it is a very easy way to kind of connect them and create a whole with all of the elements of your lettering. Another thing that I want to recommend here, and I think can be useful for all of you, is that I see this lettering piece, or I see this sketch, and I can see, especially here on the L, I can see that this sketch is drawn kind of as a figure, right? So Victoria, you were doing, which is totally fine. I mean, this lettering piece looks really great, but I think this tip that I'm gonna give you and give you all will help you kind of create sharper shapes and more precise. So, and actually this technique you are using right now is more complex than the one I'm gonna share with you right now. So what you're doing now is you're actually, and it's very common, I bet that a lot of you are doing this, is kind of drawing the figure, or like the outlines of the figure, as opposed to drawing continuous strokes. So in this case, to draw the L, you can draw this continuous stroke, and then you can draw that stroke as well continuously, right? So that creates, first, it's easier for you to draw, and second, it will make those overlappings a lot sharper. The same happens with the O. Instead of drawing the shape or the outlines of the shape, which normally creates, shapes that are not really matching. Instead of doing that, you draw the continuous stroke. So here's the upstroke of the O, and here's the downstroke of that loop, and here's the upstroke again, right? So this way, you're drawing the shape the way is drawn, or you're drawing the shape, the way it's written. So if we think that, and I know that all the students in the lettering seminar know this, if you think of the calligraphic lessons that we have inside the seminar, just to understand, the origins of letter forms in calligraphy, and O will be written that way, right? So in a calligraphic stroke, in one calligraphic loop. And what you're doing here is that you're drawing the letter form the same way that is written, right? And it makes the shape a lot more natural, organic, and easier to draw. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that you will implement it in your letter sketching, because it really makes a difference. The same happens with the connections. You just draw the connection, and then you draw the next stroke, right? So I know this is a little bit technical, a little bit of a technical, hint, but I think it can really improve your results when it comes to a hand sketch. So going back to Victoria's project, I would love to pick up on some of your comments on the chat. So I will be reading on the chat anything you may say about this project. The other thing I could add for this project is actually highlighting some of the great things you're doing here, Victoria, because I think that it's beautiful how, going back to the previous projects we were reviewing, it's really beautiful how synchronized your swirls are all over the place. So it starts with a swirl, it ends with a swirl, it starts with a swirl, it ends with another flourish, right? So in this way, this lettering piece is kind of like really balanced, right? The only thing that I would add is that looking at your the barrel of your T, that is really flamboyant and kind of has this flourish right there. I wonder if you can create something, if you look at this, you will if we think that this is the north of your lettering piece, I wonder how can you do something similar at the south of your lettering piece. And there's a couple ways of doing that, but the one that comes to mind right now is perhaps disconnecting one of the letters and make it, flourish or loop in the same way that your T is doing that right here. So you will have, the west with all these swirls that you have in your lettering, the east with all those swirls, and then the north with those swirls, and the south with swirls as well, right? So this is a little bit of the key of using this north, south, east, west, that you try to create or turn certain exceptions of your lettering into rules that show up in different places. So I hope that was useful. Victoria, let me see if there's other comments. So Maria Amalia is saying use the same angle of the lettering on the decoration lines. Yes, So let me just, the same angle of the lettering. Okay, I understand. So kind of using, that's a good hint, kind of using the same direction of your lettering to to guide your decoration lines. So that could be like another way of doing it. I don't think there's anything wrong with this way of doing it that you're using right now, like using those lines like straight lines, but that could be another idea to create or to bring in more dynamism maybe. So yeah, let's move on to, let me see if we have enough time. So yeah, we have 5 more minutes, and we will bring the project of Michael, which I think it's a digital drawing. Great. So again, a script lettering piece. We normally have a lot of script lettering pieces in our lettering creeds. I think it's just that there's a lot of fans of script lettering out there, like myself. So great. So let's focus on this lettering piece, and let's give again Michael some comments on what are the things that look great, what are the things that could be improved. So one of the things that I like to do, and I didn't mention this, so I'm gonna mention that on this lettering piece because I think it can be useful for some of you. One of the things that I really appreciate in lettering is using, or that I really like to do in my lettering pieces, is to use capitals. I think the capitals or the capital letters can bring a lot of, let me just activate this layer, a lot of flavor into your lettering, right? Because lowercase letters are a lot more, a lot more simple, and uppercase letters are can be really expressive and flamboyant, and they can add a lot of personality to your lettering. So whenever I can use capital letters, and whenever you can use capital letters, go for it. The other thing is that if I have several capital letters on my lettering piece, what I would try to do is always to design them together in a way so that they are all the same complex, or they have all the same complexity, and they all have the same size. So when we look at Michael's lettering piece, I think, Michael, there's something you could do with your capital letters. How can you make them the same, have the same complexity, have the same size? So when you look at your H, for instance, it looks a lot more expressive than and big than your other letters, right? Or actually, if I look at the H and the L, they look kind of like the same size and the same complexity. So I wonder if the G could be a bit bigger so that it can match those lettering pieces. I love how you have created this very, very dynamic composition, and it still be readable, and also, you're using this very organic baselines, which are really hard to work with, and it still is really readable and really, expressive. I love what you did here, and I also appreciate the fact that you consistently kept connections within your letter form. So if you look at the word Hoffnung, you can see that every letter connects with the next one, and the connection is smooth. And as I said before, the letters are not stabbing the next one, but they are sort of caressing the next one. And I love that in your lettering. What I wonder is, why is it that the word Liebe right here is all disconnected, right? So you can have letters that are disconnected within your lettering, script lettering. In fact, when you write, considering that script lettering is based on handwriting, when you write, you sometimes, I'm sure that you do that, and I do that as well, you sometimes disconnect some letters. So you can totally have letters that are disconnected in your lettering. But I wonder why all of your letters are connected in this and this word, and why this is the only word that is completely disconnected, where every letter is disconnected from the next one. So I wonder how you can, kind of make that letter or that word match with the rest. Either you bring some of or disconnect some of the letters in your other words, or you connect some of the letters in this word, or both actually. But yeah, it just stands out that the only word that is not connected is Liebe. So let me see. So I think use the same angle. Luisa is saying, I wish I could read this. Okay, what it means is believe, hope, and love. This is what it reads. It's in German, and I hope that I got the translation right because it's not my native language. But it's believe, hope, and love. I think the last word, the spacing is a little bit off compared to the other words. Yeah, so Luisa is also, you're also noticing that because all the letters are disconnected, then they are, this word Liebe is really airy. Rosanna is saying, I really like this one. It's easy to read and flows nicely. I agree, it flows so nicely. I think the S could be smaller to match the rest of the lowercase. Let me see the S, Hoffnung. I wonder which S you mean. The E's. Okay, the E's. Yes, I agree. I think the E's are huge, no? And it seems that, Michael, you may have taken one letter and kind of copied that in the other spots, which, is something you could do. But I think something I appreciate about lettering is how you can create variations between letters and how it differentiates from using a font because it has those variations. So there's not just one way. I always say this. There's just not one way of drawing an E. You can draw, especially in a script lettering, you can draw an E like this. You can draw an E like that and kind of connect it in the middle. You can draw an E like you're doing here, right? And figure out which shape works better for you. So Rosanna is saying, I love the swoosh of the U to fill the negative space. The swoosh of the U. Hoffnung. Oh yes, I love it too. I really like that feature right there. And overall, what I feel about these flourishes is that they're really helping you create more balance in your composition. You can see them showing up in different places. So here, there, right? What I wonder is if you could add a bit of a weight to those shapes so that they are not so rigid in a way. Right now, because they are kind of like a stroke, they are very, I feel like I could take them and break them. So by adding a bit of a weight to those shapes, you can make them a lot softer, a lot more friendly. And just by adding a bit of a terminal to those, you could already add bit more organic feeling to it. The same happens with your E, I guess. It really needs some sort of like closure, and a terminal can really give you that kind of like whenever you have a thin line and there's no serif to it, then having some sort of closure or some sort of terminal can really help. So Analia is saying, I love this work. I would just adjust the spacing between the letters in the word Liebe. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that really stands out for us all, right? So Michael, I think that connecting those letters will help, will bring them together and will solve that spacing issue. But overall, your lettering is looking amazing, and it is having that kind of, I always appreciate when a lettering is really not only communicating a message, but also kind of illustrating it. So I feel that the way this lettering is done really gives me the idea of belief and hope and love that you're trying to communicate here. So this was our last lettering piece. We have covered 4 projects today. Congratulations to Michael, to Victoria, to Luisa, and to Analia. Thank you so much for submitting these lettering pieces. For all of the students of the lettering seminar that submitted pieces but we didn't get to cover those on this session, I want to remind you that we have our community, and if you haven't used that community yet, you should definitely post your sketch on that community right after this lettering create. So if you didn't get feedback on this session, you will get feedback on the community, not only from your peers, but also myself and Elias, our instructor, is also going to be there kind of looking at what you did and giving you hints on how to move forward, or helping you solve some of the issues you may face. But I think that as you start interacting with others that are on the same journey, you will start noticing that you're not alone, and also that some of the things that you think are not working as well for you are actually looking great. So you can get those kind of extra encouragement that sometimes you need to continue to keep on going, kind of like that, hey, that looks amazing, go ahead, continue. So I think that's why our community is great, because you can get this kind of feeling that you got on this lettering creed into our platform. So the last thing to say, for those that are not in the lettering seminar, you will, after this session, you will receive a replay of this session so that you can go through it again, but also you will receive an invitation to join the lettering seminar. We open very few registration windows throughout the year, and this is one of them. So if you want to join our program, I would definitely encourage to do it right after this lettering grid. So I'm going to be sending you a couple of emails that tell you a little bit what the program is about and kind of show you how is it to work with me and to join our student community in this 8-week program. So for everyone who joined today, thank you so much for joining. For those students that didn't get their feedback on their lettering pieces, go ahead and post it on our Facebook group. And for those that are not part of our student community, I hope you will become part of our student community at some point. After today is a great moment, but if you don't do it, don't worry. We'll meet at some point in the future. I'm sure you will become part of our academy. So thank you so much for joining today, and have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.